This video is made possible by my patrons on Patreon. Hello everyone, my name is Ziamaro and welcome to Battle Sage. So, it's patch day today and with it comes a brand new season, new sponsors, quality of life changes and of course, champion updates. And just like last time, there are a lot of champion updates. There actually seems to be some kind of pattern emerging with the way that Stunlock are balancing champions. Shortly after launch, Stunlock were just making small incremental changes that didn't really change how the champion played. But for the last few months, we've seen much more drastic and sweeping changes. And at least to me, it seems like they're trying to shape champions into a particular direction. The best example of that is probably the Freya reworks that we've seen. More and more, she's being pulled away from the shield spamming brawler and more towards being a slightly more pokey champion. It's an approach that may not please everyone, but I think it's easier to balance champions for the future when you shape each of them into fulfilling a particular niche. Unfortunately, the patch has been delayed, so I won't actually be able to include in-game footage to demonstrate the changes. There's no ETA on when Season 2 drops, but I'll keep you updated on my Discord server. Depending on whether or not the servers are down when this video goes live, I might be streaming on Twitch, so go check that out in the video description. Anyway, on with the patch notes. First off, there's now an option to turn off physics to improve performance. It'll give you less information about players behind walls, but it's a nice option for people with older or slower computers. The network model has also been reworked. It's not really specified what has changed, but it's been done with the upcoming Battle Royale mode in mind. There are a few issues with Battlerite's networking, particularly how punishing it is to have a higher ping, so any improvements are welcome. So in terms of Season 1 rewards, you'll get an avatar with your highest rank achieved, and if you finished in the top 5 in your region, you'll also get a title. End of season rewards like chests have been removed in favour of the sponsor system. And speaking of which, there are 2 new sponsors alongside the previous 4. If you still have a sponsor signed from Season 1, you can continue with it. Otherwise, you can sign a new sponsor and start earning rewards along the new track. And finally, before I get to the champion updates, here's something actually kind of pointless but highly requested and much appreciated. The voice lines of the characters are now synced across clients. So before, each person would hear a random voice line, for example, when the game starts or when someone gets a kill. Now, everyone should hear the same voice line. So if you hear a funny interaction between champions, everyone will hear it. And now for the bit you've probably been waiting for, the champion updates. And unfortunately I'm going to have to skim over some of this because there's a lot to cover. So let's start from the top with Ashka. Ashka has mostly received changes to uncommon rights. 2 of his E-battle rights, Lava Punch and Fire Punch, have been removed, and they've been kinda combined to make a new battle right called Mac Punch. Mac Punch increases the pushback distance of his E while also reducing the cooldown. He's also been given another new E right called Molten Core, which causes your next fireball to deal bonus damage and inflict ignite. Next up, Bako. Overall he's been nerfed, but some of the lesser used rights have been buffed. The most significant changes are the removal of Axe and Shield. Honestly, this right was being used less and less anyway, but now it's gone altogether. The Red Axe, which was a very common right, has had its bonus healing reduced. And the weaken factor on his Bulwark recast has been reduced from 50% to 40%. He has, however, received some buffs to some of his lesser used rights, which, as you may have noticed, has been a recurring pattern in the last few patches. Hopefully this will lead to some more build variety for all champions in the future. Another interesting change with Bako is the addition of a new Q battle right called Hold the Line. If you take this right, when you block an attack with Bulwark, it grants a nearby ally with the lowest health an 18 HP shield. Next up is Croak. Not too much to talk about here. The blind duration on his EXM2 has had its duration reduced, but his E ability has been buffed. You can now cast it faster and it does more damage. Moving on to Destiny. Destiny has received some interesting buffs. Her Dispatch battle right now allows her to continue rolling after the recast. This will allow for some much more interesting movement. So now you could space, then recast to hop over a wall, and continue moving in the space at full speed. It's worth noting though that your space's attack charge is spent when you hop, so you can't hop over a wall and then boop someone. Energy conversion, one of her Q battle rights, has had its base shield increased slightly, while expansion pack, the R battle right, has been reworked. Before, it would increase the duration of the fading snare. Now it replaces the fading snare with a root, so depending on your playstyle, that could be an interesting one. One of her lesser used E-battle rights, Lasting Plasma, has been removed, and it's been replaced with Plasma Accelerator. This causes your plasma wall to significantly increase the speed of allies' projectiles that go through the wall. It also makes Destiny's projectiles deal 2 bonus damage when they travel through. This is a really interesting one, and I can't wait to try out some Battleship comp firing super speed projectiles through the plasma wall. Next up, we have Esmo. Esmo's E ability, Shackle, has had its cast time increased slightly, but it's had its damage increase to match. And in a running trend from the previous few patches, Grimoire of Death, the ultimate right, has been changed yet again. It now deals 10 damage during the leash portion of the ultimate, and the regular 50 damage when the ultimate explodes. Before, Esmo could put his ult in the middle and time it so the ult exploded just as the orb spawned. There was literally no counterplay to it, so I'm quite happy to see Stunlock address this. It's possible that it will make the right much less popular though, and if that's the case, we may see some damage added to the leash in a future patch. Moving on to Freya. Freya has had some more shield nerfs. Her counter now gives her a reduced shield for each time it gets hit. Before, she would get a flat 18 shield for every single time her counter was hit. Now, the first hit gives her 18, the second gives her 15, and every hit after that gives 12. At higher ranks, it's less common for the counter to be hit more than a couple of times, although it certainly does happen from time to time. But for lower ranked Freyas, this should be a significant nerf. Her E-right, Lightning Rod, has been given a similar treatment. Before, it gave a flat 8 shield for every person caught in it. Now it's 8 for the first, 7 for the second, and 6 for the third person hit. So if you hit 3 people with it, before it would have given a 24 HP shield, now it only gives 21. One buff for Freya, however, is the bonus damage on her EXE when she hits a target with static. It now does 8 bonus damage instead of 6, so this further shapes her into a strong ranged poke champion. Only a small change with Iva, but it's a significant one. Her EMP battle right, the one that makes her E purge, now also removes negative effects from nearby allies. This gives Iva a second cleanse, so that should be pretty strong. Jade has had 2 of her lesser used rights buffed. Shadow Shot now heals for 12 when you hit a snipe instead of 8, and her ultimate right, Shrapnel, has been buffed. The snare now lasts for 2 seconds and causes each hit from the ultimate to do an extra 2 damage. Now, Jamila. Jamila is one of the champions to receive some significant changes. First off, her EXM2 now heals the nearest ally with the lowest HP. Before, I'm guessing it just healed the nearest ally regardless of what their health was at, so that's a nice change. The immaterial on her counter has had its duration increased, and the cast time on her R ability has been reduced yet again. In terms of rights, some of her lesser used rights have been completely removed, but there's also been some changes to her existing ones. First, and this is a big one, Quick Strike has been changed from an E battle right to a space right. If you take Quick Strike, it allows you to recast your space, which will perform a short dash which deals 10 damage and inflicts lesser phantom, which will deal 16 damage after 2 seconds. This is a really interesting change that should give Jamila some extra damage output and maybe a bit of extra movement. 3 new battle rights have also been added. Crimson Blur, which gives Jamila a huge haste buff when her counters hit. Shroud of Shadows, which is pretty much the same as Croak's Slippery Skin right. She takes 30% less damage after invisibility ends. And finally, Deceptive Momentum, which makes you take 75% less damage during the hookshot animation. Because hookshot isn't an iframe, it makes Jamila kind of vulnerable. This will make her engagements a lot safer. And now for the big one. The ultimate has been reworked, and they've done pretty much what the community was asking for. You can now recast the ultimate to swap places with the Phantom, and it actually fully cleanses yourself as well. Whether or not this will make Jamila's ultimate any better than the trash tier it was before is yet to be seen, but it's great to see some steps being taken to improve it. Jamong has received some small changes. Prey Drive, a lesser picked mouse 2 right, has had its healing shuffled a bit. It now heals 10 when you hit your mouse 2, and a further 6 if you consume Seeker's Mark. Marked Prey, a very uncommon right, has been removed, and Trapper, the right that gives Jamong a double trap, has had its second trap's duration reduced. Not too much to say about Lucy. Her Dynamic Solution, a very uncommon pick, now also increases the knockback on her Q. Moving on to Older, Eternal Dunes, the right that gives you healing charges back when you hit your E, now allows you to build up to 5 healing charges. So if you already had 3 healing charges saved up and then you hit 2 or more people with your E, you can now have 5 charges saved up. So this is a significant buff to Alder's healing in certain situations, particularly in 3v3. Pearl's Bubble has had its snare factor reduced slightly, but 2 of her rights, Riptide and Tsunami, have had their damage increased slightly. Pestilus has mostly just received changes to his lesser used rights. One change to his base kit, however, the duration on his EXE, Brain Bug, has been increased slightly. Everything else is just a change to his battle rights, and honestly, a lot of the buffs to his rights still won't be picked due to him having 4 must-pick rights and only really 1 flex pick. A lot of people in the community have suggested that his Queen recast right should just be part of his base kit. Broodmother, one of his Q rights, now increases the area of the Queen as well as increasing the fear duration. That's a really good right, but it will never be picked because he already has 2 must-pick rights on the Queen. He's had a new right added too, Heart of the Swarm, which is a new R right. This causes his shield to send out lesser moth projectiles when it's destroyed. The projectiles deal 5 damage or 3 healing, and it also reduces the cooldown of the shield by 3 seconds. A quick skim over Paloma. All of her changes are to very uncommon rights. Dark Souls and Soul Theft are basically meme rights and will probably continue to be, while Ghostly Strike does have situational uses, but it's still incredibly rare. Raigon has had one of his lesser used rights removed and 2 of the lesser used rights buffed. But the really interesting change is the addition of the new right, Seismic Retribution. This causes your E hits to reduce the cooldown of your right clicks, and it grants you 2 weapon charges. This could allow for some really interesting combos, particularly in combination with the E recast. Okay, so Rook. This guy has been absolutely dominating solo queue lately. So let's just talk about the interesting parts here. First of all, the healing over time on his eat has been reduced slightly. This is probably to reduce his self-sustain in solo queue, because right now he's an absolute monster. In organized play, this change will probably be less noticeable, but the main problem with him is in solo queue. So, the space and right click damage buffs from the previous patch have been reverted. The stun duration on his space has also been reduced slightly. However, his squash battle right has been removed and it's been added to his base kit. The stun duration has been reduced slightly as well, but his mouse 2 is now stunned by default. This gives him the ability to pick another battle right. Some people have been memeing that he now has 6 rights, but honestly, having a virtually 100% pick right just reduces your choices. I can't think of a single situation where Rook wouldn't want the stun on his mouse 2. So the push towards removing must-pick rights and adding them to the base kit just makes for more build variety, which I think is a good thing. So let's just do the same thing with Pestilus now. Rukan has had some slight buffs. His mouse 2 while in his ultimate has had its pull distance increased. The projectile still goes the same distance, but when it hits it pulls the enemy closer. The knockback duration has also been increased slightly. Furthermore, his E-battle right, Death Grip, now reduces the cooldown by 1.5 seconds, and a further 1.5 seconds if you hit it. It's not a common right, but it does mean that if you pick it, you can pull someone every 4 seconds. He's also been given a new R right, Netherblade. Now, if you use your R to inflict curse on someone, it gives you back a mouse 1 charge. We're almost there, guys, only a few more champions to go. Sirius has mostly received changes to his lesser used rights. One interesting one though is the change to Moonlight. This has been given a similar treatment to Alder. Moonlight gives you a healing charge back for every enemy hit with Petrify. And just like Alder, you can now store up to 5 charges with this right. Tyre has had some slight nerfs. The damage per hit on her mouse 2 has been reduced. So it will still do the same damage to the primary target, but it means you can't do as much damage to multiple targets. Throwing Technique, one of her mouse 2 battle rights, has also been nerfed slightly. Thorn has mostly been nerfed. The energy gain on his space has been reduced, the range on his Q has been reduced, and the damage on his Impaling Roots battle right has been reduced. The Q range in particular will sting a bit. It forces Thorn to get a little bit closer to the action to engage, and it also means he can't pull the orb from quite as far away. He has, however, received some buffs to his lesser used rights. Moving on to Ulrich. His EX space has had its travel time increased. So it takes him longer to dash, but it could mean that he has a slightly longer iframe. We'll probably have to test that out to be sure though. Aside from that, 2 of his Q rights have been buffed, while his E right, Halo, has had its shield value reduced slightly. Next up, Varesh. His E-Right inhibitor allows him to retain some movement while casting Shatter. The movement speed on this right has been reduced by a noticeable amount, so that is quite a bit of a nerf. However, his counter right Return has had its recast time increased to 2.5 seconds. It's not super common, but I have been seeing it more and more lately. At least in solo queue, it can really catch people out. Against most champions, if you hit the counter, you can focus them afterwards. But with this right, it means Varesh can counter again after being hit. In organised play, it's unlikely that people will hit it twice, but it does give Varesh 2.5 seconds where people are unlikely to focus him after his counters hit. So it may not have an effect at high ranks, but I guess we'll see. But it could be a good buff at lower ranks. And finally, Xander. Xander has had his must-pick right, Arcane Conductor, removed. This was the right that increased the amplify factor on Arcane Catalyst. Arcane Catalyst now just gives a flat 15% damage increase, which frees up a battle right for Xander. He has totally lost the extra duration that Arcane Conductor gave though. Ace up the sleeve, the right that reset his mouse 2 when he went through a portal, now also works when an ally goes through the portal. This makes it a much more useful and much less risky right than before. He's also had a new mouse 2 right added, Awestruck. This adds a fading snare to his mouse 2 hits. His sheep rights have also been reworked slightly. Transformation Sickness, which was pretty uncommon anyway, has been completely removed and it's been replaced with the big stage. This increases the sheep radius and reduces the cooldown. Lead Astray, however, has been nerfed. It now applies Arcane Catalyst after sheep ends. This isn't a big deal in all situations, but it does mean less damage on the sheep into mouse 2 combo. Well, that's it for now, guys. I know I skimmed over a bunch of stuff, but I tried to elaborate on the stuff that I think is most important. Once the servers get patched, good luck in your Season 2 placements, and maybe see you on Twitch. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please feel free to subscribe for more Battle Right guides, news, and discussion. If you'd like to help support the channel and get some unique rewards, then head over to patreon.com/BattleRightSage. And don't forget to check out twitch.tv/BattleRightSage. Until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.